My name is Jason Buffington with the Enterprise Strategy Group. For the last couple of weeks, I've been looking at regulatory compliance and comparing that with operational readiness. This week's highlight, federal government regulations. According to the ESG IT Spending Intentions Report for 2013, improving data backup and recovery actually came in as the #2 planned expenditure for 2013. Interesting though, if you look on the bottom of that same list, you'd find improving regulatory compliance as well as business continuity and disaster recovery, each coming in tied in that #9 slot coming down. In fact, if you looked at last year in 2012, the top 10 areas of data protection investment specifically were again, business continuity and disaster recovery is #1, regulatory compliance coming in at #2. There's a lot of interest and a lot of commitment around trying to solve for these areas, but it's important to note they really are different. This is the difference between can you check all the boxes on the left-hand list versus do you really have operational agility within your infrastructure. So this week we want to look at what are the regulations as they relate to the federal government as well as the agencies that directly work with them. Look, continuous operations, or COOP as the federal government calls it, is not new. In fact, ever since the 1780s, the original Constitution had mandates in it assuring that the federal government services would continue no matter what. You fast forward that 200 years, you actually find some of the more recent laws that talk about that, like something that say the Federal Preparedness Circular FPC 65, which came in 1999, just again enforcing the idea of COOP, or continuous operations of the federal branch. Now, those mandates get updated every couple of years, and especially when we see some kind of major calamity such as Hurricane Katrina. And in those cases, we see things like the Department of Homeland Security issuing DHS Directive Part 20. Again, it talks about national continuity of service. In this one, if you really dig into it, again, HSPD 20, you can look it up on the web or just keep listening. If you look in Section 11 of that, you'll actually find there's some guidance specifically around data backup. It's actually subsection 11, Part C. If you dig in further, you'll also find there's mandates around rapid restoration, meaning, okay, not only do I know how often I need to back up, but I get some kind of mandates as far as how quickly does that data need to be restorable as well. That's Section 11, Part D. If I were to go further into HSPD 20, you'd also see Section 16 talks about the importance of the DHS improving disaster recovery and business continuity at state and local level. Now, a couple interesting things here. It talks about in 16 Part F that the private sector critical infrastructure actually is part of the same, is covered in the same mandate. Also, and this is kind of interesting, in Section 11 Part G, it tells you how you can actually get funding for it. So take a look at those. 11 and 16 will give you a lot of directives on backup as well as how you might get the government to pay for it. Now, there's other things that you want to look at as well. If you look in 2008, FEMA actually talked about something called Federal Compliance Directives, or FCDs, and FCD #1, right out of the chute, talks about the regular testing of mitigating small crises within your infrastructure. So it's about high availability, it's about resiliency. Now, key thing here on all the directives we're talking about, none of them will tell you exactly which technologies to use, but they will tell you what the outcome needs to be, how quick, how long, etc. So at least it gives you a place to start. And the goal is to dig into the regs, find the very few pieces that might apply to you, like what we're doing here, and then try to map that back into your overall data protection strategy. How are we going to make sure we check those boxes while we're also just ensuring, yes, we really are backing stuff up. Yes, we really can't fail it over. Now, there's one more that is actually where the namesake of COOP came from in the last several years. It actually started with the Department of Defense. It's DoD 5015.2 STD. This actually started out with the Department of Defense, and it was the military who was saying, how long should we be holding data for, and then passing those regulations on to all the base admins and then also the campaign network administrators as well. Okay, so we did all that. Well, then what happened was the rest of the federal government said, or at least the executive branch said, hey, we should go ahead and adopt that as a standard. In fact, the National Archives got involved and actually made that the standard for the executive branch as well. And so when you dig into that, and so follow these letters with me, it's Section C, Part 2, Subpart 2, Sub Part 9. But if you dig that deep, you will find descriptions of what backup and also your recovery and rollback requirements are if you are in working with the federal branch, either at a state level, a private sector, a contractor, or in fact are part of the federal branch itself. Hopefully what you saw is the regulations aren't as specific as you might think, but they aren't as complicated either, as long as you dig in and can find the parts that actually matter to you. Once you found those parts, instead of trying to address regulatory compliance as a separate set of initiatives within your organization, the goal should be to take those compliance mandates and put them into the larger set of what are you accountable for to your executive management. It becomes part of your overall data protection strategy. That allows for not only regulatory compliance and passing an audit, but also the technical agility to actually recover your operations, whether it's across your physical, your virtual, or your cloud-based infrastructures. Hopefully that helps. Come back to my blog, technicaloptimist.com, and find out other regulations that might have similar benefits.